This morning I've asked David Zidel to please facilitate the webinar for us. David is always on board for all our In the Boardroom speakers and has facilitated our In the Boardrooms with the likes of Adrian Gore, Simon Sussman, Roland, and Michael Sassoon. And he always does such an incredible job. So I would like to give thanks.
Just come here and help me. Where's the sound?
For those of you that don't know, David is a training specialist, keynote speaker, and author. He understands finance and business on so many different levels, and he's been specializing in finance and behavioral economics for 20 plus years. So having introduced David, we hope that you enjoy this morning. We hope that you find it inspiring. Lee is an incredible woman, an amazing woman, and we're all super excited to hear about her story and her journey. So I'm handing over to David a couple of housekeeping rules before I do. Please could I ask everybody to mute themselves. We will be monitoring chats in the chat box, and we will be answering your questions. We will further leave time towards the end of the webinar for anything that you would like to ask Lee. So having said that, David, over to you at the beautiful seaside, and thank you again.
Right, thank you, Tracy. And Lee, thank you for joining us. Just before we get going, we're going to be doing a poll just in terms of, obviously, AutoJet is a non-profit organization and rely on charities and collecting some funds. So Tracy will put up a message, and if you'd like to make a donation, you can. You can select one of those that comes up. It should be on your screen at the moment, and it will be very gratefully received if you do. So thank you. So I want to start off just explaining a little bit about, is it a person or the people we're going to be speaking to? So if I told you that we're going to speak to somebody that summited Mount Everest, and it's the third South African woman to do that, and then we're going to speak to somebody that completed 6 full Ironman events. And the Ironman event is a long swim, a long bike ride, and then a marathon. And then we'll speak to someone who's done what's known as the most difficult ultramarathon in the world, the toughest road race in the world, in the Sahara Desert. And it's the equivalent of running for 6 days, every day a marathon. And then maybe we should speak to somebody who's managed to build a multi-million-rand events company. And then somebody who won the South African Businesswoman's Award of the year. And then on top of that, it's somebody who's survived actually being stabbed in the back. How many of us have used the term, oh, they stabbed me in the back? And we use it just figuratively, but literally, Lee was actually stabbed in the back. And we're going to go through this. And this sounds like these are different people. The most amazing thing about this is all one person who's achieved this. Each one of these on their own is unbelievable. But for one person to achieve all of this is beyond. And it's similar to on Passover, on Pesach, when we say all the plagues and all the things that got people out of Egypt, and after each one we say Dayenu, which means just that would have been enough. And each one of these is a Dayenu. Each one of these is that would have been enough. Completing the Ironman, wow. The toughest race, wow. Each one on their own. So we want to try and get the story behind this. And a couple of things about Lee that I'll fill in beforehand. But she said climbing Mount Everest was the hardest thing that she's ever done. But it also proved to be her greatest gift. And she really lives by and believes that absolutely nothing is impossible. She besides that whole list of things, it's also written a book. And it's really, and this is what I want to get into, the thought behind this, of what happens when you say yes? What really happens? And something beyond that. So Lee's birthday, Lee, if I'm correct, is the 1st of April.
Yes, that's correct.
So are you an April Fool's joke? Are you really just serious? And are you really, is this for real that you do all these things? I mean, has the 1st of April got anything to do with it? And I'm saying that specifically because there's one other thing during lockdown that Lee did that I picked up from the newspapers. She's got a little garden. She ran around the garden and completed in a lap of 10 meters, 10 meters, 10 meters, 10 meters, 40 meters around. She finished running a full-on marathon in her garden. And I mean, all of this is amazing. But a quote of all of this that stood out for me was, when your purpose is greater than your challenge, you can achieve anything. And this is what you said in one of your interviews. And so the talk today, I do want to go through the things that you've been through and how you've achieved it. But I'd like it if we could go to the thoughts behind it. What is your daily routine? How did you get the mindset that anything is possible? Where you left Joburg and you went to Cape Town and you just knocked on the door of a company that you wanted to join and said, I'm here, here's my CV. And then that worked. Didn't work a couple of times and then it worked. And then you went to New York and you did the same thing in New York. You just knocked on the doors. And that didn't work and it led to you being attacked. Somebody wanted to steal your backpack, stabbed you in the back. You came home almost, I don't know if broken's the right word, I don't think so, but you came back injured. And from there, you went on this unbelievable drive. Were you always like this? Was this just waiting for Lee to erupt? Or did something happen in that process that made you into this? So if you can just take us a little bit through these different achievements, but then I really want to get to kind of what's underlying all of that. What drives you? And how did you say that if you have a greater purpose, you can achieve anything? How do you find that purpose? How do you find that thing that is greater than all the challenges?
Wow.
So over to you.
Sure, David, thank you so much for this unbelievable intro. I was thinking every time I do a talk, I'd like to take you with me and you can introduce me. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for all the detail and just the way you've positioned it. And again, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity this morning. You know, David, your questioning is actually so great. And I love question and answer style talks because for me, I feel it's way more valuable than doing a 45-minute keynote, which I've been doing for the last 8 years, because you really unpack what one person is asking, somebody else wants to ask something different, because we are also different in this life. But you know, to go back to your main question about purpose greater than your challenge, and this is my key message in my life as well as in my talks, and that is, at the end of the day, every time I've done something really tough, what it's done is it's a gift for me, because it shows me, you know what, you did that, you can do something else, and you can do something else, and you can do something else. Everest for me was the most difficult thing I've done. Yes, I had done Ironman, I'd done a few endurance events, but South Africa, we don't know ice, we don't know snow, we don't know avalanches, we don't know temperatures as low as minus 21 degrees. That was my first night at base camp, and I was at base camp, I was on Everest for 2 months. And there were things in my life that I thought that I hadn't trained for this. There was no ways I was going to get through it. And I remember being on this mountain for 2 months, getting to the death zone, which is 8,000 meters. We'd been down there for 7 weeks. And Everest, the summit, was less than a kilometer away. It was 848 meters. And when I do my talks, I ask the audience, if you had to walk 848 meters, which is less than a kilometer, how long would it take you? And people would say 10 minutes or 12 minutes or 20 minutes to walk 1 kilometer. That last push took me 14 and a half hours to get to the summit of Everest. And I didn't think, when I got to the summit, I didn't think I was going to get back to the death zone. It was the hardest point in my life. I was hallucinating. My body was out of control. It was minus 34 degrees. The wind chill was minus 50. And it took me to such an extreme point in my life. And I was asked that question, Lee, did you ever think you weren't going to make it? And David, I didn't think I was going to get from the top of the summit back to the death zone. And the most important question is that when I thought I wasn't going to, what plugged into my head and my heart is, what was my purpose? Why was I doing what I was doing in the top of the world as a novice climber? And what kicked in, it was the purpose. And I really believe in everything that I've done. And I encourage anybody to dig deep what their purpose is. If you know what that is and you're conscious of that, you will know that any challenge you can overcome, because you will know how to get through. If you really know why you're doing something, you're going to know the why. And that has come to the fore in every single thing in my life. And, you know, in terms of Ironman, I've done 6 of them, as you said in your intro. I was never an endurance athlete. I was actually never an athlete. I used to be over 25 kilograms heavier than what I am today. And somebody had a significant conversation with me. They said, you know what, Lee, top athletes are top business people, and top business people are top athletes. And it's not that I wanted to get my colors or be on the podium, but that's what I wanted to be, David. I wanted to be a great athlete, and I wanted to be great in business. And I put that identity together, and I entered my first Ironman. I didn't even know what the distances were. And this athletic sporting journey began for me. And it said, as an athlete, there I am doing one of the hardest sporting events in the world. I didn't want to win it. I just wanted to do it. I just wanted to finish it. And I've done that. And I think the greatest gift when you do tough things is you realize how strong you are. You know, 2 weeks ago, I was really fortunate. I did a session with the Olympic divers in London. It was all virtual, all about true grit. And yesterday I did again to a company in London about true grit. And what true grit is you don't know how strong you are until you are put in the toughest situation. And human beings are absolutely incredible, and we're amazing, and we're way more powerful than what we know and what we think, because we push through. A year ago, this same company, I was in London and I was talking to them, and I said, if I told you in 12 months' time you'd be working from home, you'd be wearing masks, this would be happening in the world, you would have thought that I'd had put vodka on my Kellogg's that morning instead of fresh milk. And what comes to the fore is the true grit. You know, and so to bring that underlying thing about purpose and challenge, applying that to business, to every event, sporting event, the toughest things, it helps you get through because you know why you're doing it. And if you know why you're doing it, you're going to know how to push through.
So what was your why when you started and taking on a challenge that you didn't even know what it entails? And it sounds like this is a theme through your life of you have an idea and you just go for it. So
yeah,
what was your purpose of doing that? Was it to prove it to yourself? Or?
Definitely with Everest, there was a very big purpose, very big. You know, I run an event company. I've been running it for 21 years. And in 2012, we were doing an event for a medical aid company. And they wanted an inspirational speaker. And we used Lewis Pugh, incredible South African living in Cape Town. I'm sure you know of him. He's known as the human polar bear. And he did this whole talk about that absolutely nothing in this life is impossible. If you really believe you can do it, you can do it. There he was swimming in a Speedo in all these inhospitable lakes and rivers in the world and Antarctica for great causes. And I was so inspired by him, David. I really was. It was June. I watched him on the Friday, and on that Sunday, I was sitting on the couch in my lounge and I thought, what's the next big thing I want to challenge myself to do? A few years before that, I thought about Mount Everest, going to base camp. But I sat there on the couch thinking, David, but why go to base camp when you can go to the top of the world? And I knew nothing about Mount Everest except it was the highest mountain in the world. The very next morning, I go to work and I go onto Google and I put one question in: how do I climb and summit Mount Everest? And all this information came to me. 2 big things. I had no idea Everest took 2 months on the mountain. I'd only done one mountain in my life, which was, I think, 11 years before that. Kilimanjaro, which is 4 days up and it's 2 days down. Everest being 2 months. But the most important piece of information, which was a bit of a shock for me, I had no idea that Everest was going to cost me 600,000 Rand for this personal adventure. And I kept on thinking, if I get to the top of the summit of the world, the highest mountain, and after having paid this kind of money, if I get there and be able to say to friends at a dinner table one night, you know what, guys, I made it to the top of the world, would be pretty much ego-driven, I'll be honest with you. And I remember it was a few weeks after that, I was having coffee with a friend of mine, Kate. I said, Kate, I'm planning to go to the highest point in the world. Who in South Africa would need raising money, raising awareness? And she said, you know what, Lee, there's an amazing group of children out at the Hartbeespoort Dam, which, as you know, is about an hour away from Sandton. And David, I went to start meeting these children in the November, and the first little boy I met was 9 years old, taking care of his 5-year-old sister. And I said to the preschool teacher, Sylvia, I said, Sylvia, but who's taking care of all these kids? And she said, Lee, whoever will be kind to them. And David, this whole journey started. I started training with the kids. They had them sign the South African flag. And I was really fortunate that Carte Blanche caught wind of my story. And there was a lot of publicity around this. And I had the opportunity 3 months before taking on Everest to say on Carte Blanche, I wanted to appeal to every single South African to climb this mountain with me so we could raise money, raise awareness, to build a center for these kids, and one day a clinic, that one day they would be able to climb their own Everest, whatever that Everest is for them. And this beautiful journey began. So I took on the mountain, and so I had 2 massive goals: to get to the summit for a personal adventure, which I had planned, and a personal goal. But then I had so much support, and there was a big commitment from my side. These kids there was need, and there was a delivery. So part of the goal was getting to the top of the world, and the second part was to do what I had said I was going to do. And summiting Everest in 2013, it was a year later, we created the Field of Dreams Foundation, and on the 5th of December, we opened the doors to the Field of Dreams Children's Center.
Wow, that's incredible. So you almost decided to do it, but you found the motivation afterwards, that came afterwards.
Yeah.
And do you find you're somebody who plans ahead, or you just do things and you find the route and discover the route as you're going? Do you find the motivation as you're doing things?
Yes, I do. I'm very impulsive, and I'm unafraid of risks. And here's an example. After Everest, I always knew the next adventure would find me, and I knew it was never going to be another mountain. Most definitely not. Everest was my big one, and that was it. I'm not a mountaineer, and I'm not a mountain climber. I still believe that. But it was 3 years later, and I was on a small plane flying to Pietermaritzburg to do a motivational talk there. And in the In-Flight magazine, there was an article about this race in Morocco in the Sahara Desert called the Marathon des Sables, known as the toughest foot race in the world. And I read there that a 71-year-old guy had done this, and I thought, if he could do this at 71, this is what I can do. So I went from the extreme cold to the extreme heat. So in terms of planning ahead, if I see there's something I want to do, I mean, for example, with Everest, I decided in June, by March the next year, I was on that mountain, whereas people spend years planning that, training for that. I'm pretty quick in terms of making the decision, finding the adventure, and then just going for it.
Okay. And your book's titled Finding the Yes, or Getting to Yes, and How Yes Can Change Your Life. Is there anything you've said no to? What would you say no to? Have you said no to adventures, and why?
Have I said no? I haven't really said no to adventures. I'm always training for something. And interesting, I'm 50 years old right now. And David, all the things in the intro that you've put there, from the Ironman to Everest to the Sahara Desert, I've only done all those things in the last 10 years of my life. You know, so which is also just, I encourage people that you're never too old to do anything. When I was on the mountain in 2013, the oldest man in the world as a climber summited. He was 80 years old from Japan. And what I love, he was in competition with another 80-year-old from Nepal. The Japanese climber made it and the Nepalese one didn't. But the last things that I've done, these exciting things or these endurance events, are only in the last 10 years of my life that I've done.
That saying, life begins at 40, it's just a saying. You don't have to take it seriously.
Exactly.
So what were you like up to 40 then? How come you didn't have all these great achievements? And what was that defining moment? Was it being stabbed in New York? That was your defining moment that said, maybe my life is at risk. Now I can just do anything. Was it that, or is it something else?
When I made the decision to go to New York City, I was 30 years old, and there's a great line that says, when you think you know everything, you actually know nothing. And at the age of 30, I thought I knew everything. I was 30 years old. I was working for Nike in South Africa. I'd only been with them for 2 years. And David, I had this massive dream of going to New York City and working for Nike in Manhattan. I never sent them an email. I didn't get my papers in orders. I just went there to live the American dream with this massive vision in mind that I was going to be in the Big Apple and with a super wonderful position at Nike, completely ignorant, naive, and I think pretty stupid at the time. But my dream was big. I resigned from Nike South Africa, and I was on a plane in July, and there I headed off to Manhattan. And I had a very, I wouldn't say unimpressive CV, but it was a CV that was definitely not going to rock the world. And I got to Manhattan, and within 24 hours, I looked up the address of the Nike office in Manhattan, and I went there completely unannounced. I didn't set up an appointment. I didn't even know who worked in the marketing department. But I got to the reception and I said, please, could I see somebody in your marketing department? And this lovely Asian woman called Joanne came, and I said, hi, my name is Lee Denhornt. I'm from South Africa. And I had my CV, and I said, I'm here to work for Nike. She looked at me, she was a little bit confused, and she said, are you here on vacation? I said, no, I've moved here. I'm here from South Africa, and I'm here to work for Nike. And she slowly let me down gently by saying, well, all job opportunities are not in Manhattan. They're in Portland, Oregon. And that's where the Nike head office is, which I knew where the head office was. She said, there are absolutely no positions. Manhattan is a small regional office. So I walked out of there with my tail between my legs, and for the next few months, for the duration of my visa, I was doing odd jobs. I was there illegally, no papers. So student work, hostessing in restaurants. And it was really, it was a very tough time for me. I'd gone there with a big dream, very much ego driven. And when I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. On the 20th of September, I was crossing Madison Avenue at 12:15 at night. I had my Nike backpack on my back with $3 inside there, and there was no one in sight. It was very, very late and dark, and something inside of me said, turn around. And I turned around, and there was a guy behind me, about 10 meters behind me. He had a piece of paper in his hand, looking at the paper, looking up at the buildings, and I thought, is he looking for directions? I was actually on the phone speaking to my partner in Toronto, and 10 seconds later, David, he stabbed me with a knife in my back, and the knife wound was right next to my spine. Hit the ground, and within a few hours, I was lying in the New York City hospital. And a few months passed after that, and in January the following year, on the day that my visa was up, I got back to South Africa. And something that I speak about is, I mean, I had less than $20, which was equivalent to 391 Rand. And I had nothing. And when you have nothing in life, you've got absolutely nothing to lose. And I had this opportunity to start my company, which is now 21 years old, starting to do events linked to an ad agency. And I worked and I worked and I worked and I worked. So I do believe that I've always been driven, and I'm goal orientated, and I always aim for success to be the result. But in terms of the sporting events, that came on later in my life, 10 years later. But business, always very, very driven. You know, I was a novice in the mountain. I was a novice in terms of running my own business, but I was very committed.
So do you have a daily routine that you go through? So you've got a goal, either business-wise or climbing or running. Do you have a routine that you stick to? Are you very routine driven, or do you just wake up and decide what you're going to do? What does your day look like in terms of achieving a goal?
You know, I do believe that the last 12 months have been a strange time for everyone, with lockdown, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. I think when it comes to routine, it's very much determined by regulation. Before in March last year, whenever there's a goal in mind, absolutely there is structure and there's a program, and there's definitely a training schedule in place. And you know, people, and I say it with no judgment at all, because I've been on the other side where I had no goals and where I didn't have exercise or sport in my life, but people say, but I don't get to it, or there isn't enough time, or my day runs away with me. And I believe with exercise or anything that's important to you, if it's important enough to you, you're going to make the time for it. You know, and when training for an Ironman, it requires a lot of endurance, time on your legs, in the pool, on the bike. That is hours. And it's all about planning. It's planning the day and making time for what you need to do to achieve the goal.
Okay, so I once heard a quote that said, if you haven't got time for something, it's just not a big enough priority for you. Mm. In other words, something has a bigger priority, and that's why you haven't got time.
Yeah.
So what goal are you heading for at the moment? Is there something you've selected, something that you're aiming for?
I haven't entered it. There is something I'm aiming for, but all dependent of if we can't, although I believe 100% we will be flying around the world. And I do believe there'll be a massive sense of normality in the end of this year. And there's a wonderful race. It's known as the highest altitude race in the world. And it's in Nepal. It's 6 days of 160 kilometers. And I'd really love to do that and go and There's about 45 athletes that do it every single year, and that would be my big aim. But David, I want to reflect on something that you said about that quote in terms of making the time. It's also about allocating the correct time. And what I mean by that is that we say the 24 hours, the bigger the billionaire, everyone's all got 24 hours in a day. It was in 2013 when I was on Everest, and I will never forget a day about really allocating my time properly in order to reach a goal. We'd been at base camp for 11 days, and I remember opening the door of my tent and looking all the way in the distance, and I could see there, gone, was the summit of Everest. And I remember Everest is the height of which aeroplanes fly. It's 29,000 feet. And I looked at that and I was a novice climber. I'd never been to these heights, most definitely not. Kilimanjaro, very different to Everest, being a 2-month and over nearly 9 kilometers in terms of height. But at base camp, where I was with this Canadian expedition company. They were amazing. And we had Wi-Fi, we had connectivity. And every single day I had my phone and I was running my company, answering emails, engaging with my team in Nepal at the base camp of Everest to Johannesburg, South Africa. And I remember thinking about Steve Hanson's line. Now, Steve Hanson, as we know, coach of the New Zealand All Blacks that have had success World Cup after World Cup after World Cup. And he says, when my players are not performing, it's because their minds are cluttered. And I thought to myself, Lee, you've got to start uncluttering your mind. You've got to make time and make priorities for the stuff that really counts in the next 2 months. I'm either going to achieve the goal of running my company in Johannesburg from base camp Everest, or I'm going to achieve the goal of getting to the highest point in the world as a novice climber. But I've got to unclutter my mind and I've got to pick a lane to see what is the most important goal. I switched off my phone and I never looked at it again for the next 7 weeks. So, in terms of making time, you've got to make sure the time is for the right stuff, because there's only so many hours and time is precious. There's never going to be another 26th of January right here, right now. It's just unbelievable. And we think we've got time. We don't. We've got to make the right decisions and allocate your time preciously and perfectly and properly.
So I think a lot of people suffer from the aspect of scared to say yes. They're scared to take on that challenge. They're a novice. They don't have the money. They don't have a big enough why. And it kind of stops them. They have a belief that, oh, well, I can't do it, or something distracts them. How are you different in that all those things didn't distract you? Is there something that you did? Is there some belief that you have about yourself or the world that allows you to go for the yes?
David, I believe we've all got a choice. You can either be a spectator in this life or you can be a participant in this life. Again, I say, if you haven't done something, if you've got nothing in that area, what have you got to lose? In terms of, thinking about, if I made a decision to do X, Y, and Z, if I achieved that, what would the result be? It's really looking at the exercise, and of course, finance dependent. It's one thing to say, well, there's all these massive adventures. Yes, at a cost, but also the reality factor comes into that 100%. But I think even in the small things, the big things, one's got to say, well, what's the worst that can happen? The worst thing that could happen is regret. And I think so. I don't want to regret something. I want to say, what? I tried it. Because if you're not trying it, you're failing the biggest thing. You're failing yourself. And that's why I always say, make a decision today to do something that's going to make you feel great. Because at the end of the day, life is all about the way you feel about yourself. It's about your mindset.
So you say, what's the worst thing that could happen? I mean, for you climbing Mount Everest, it could have been you no longer exist. So, I mean, that is quite a drastic.
Absolutely. But David, when I made that decision, and you are so right, my family, they thought I was crazy. They said, you've run races, you've done something. But as South Africans, we don't know those kind of mountains. As I said, we don't know snow, ice, and avalanches. And what are you doing going to Everest? It was so far, and there was massive, massive concern from them. What I needed to do is I needed to reassure them that I was going with the right company. And when I say the right company, I spent a lot of time reading on Google who was taking on this mountain. In 2013, there was no South African company taking on Everest. And I managed to find a Canadian company, wonderful company called Peak Freaks. And what motivated me to go with this company, they had been in the industry for 19 years. They had one line on the website that said, we have a 100% safety record. And what that meant is that nobody had died on any of their expeditions. When I was on the mountain in 2013, there were 9 climbers that lost their lives. You know, Everest, I needed to reassure my family that I was taking a risk. I was doing something that I had absolutely never done before, but to tell them that I was going with a company with the right credentials, the leader who had the right credentials, to say that, you know, she's going to the unknown, but she's got people supporting her that know what they've done, are doing, and they've done this before.
Yeah. So your book is titled What Happens When You Say Yes. So what does happen? What changes when you say yes?
When you say yes, I really believe you're committing to something, no matter how big it is, no matter how small it is. And if you're committing to something, there's got to be a result. It's up to you as to what the result is. And you're in that book. I mean, it's a very easy read. It's an inspirational read, but it's the big stories and the small stories. It's not just about Everest, you know, because I do believe, especially now, people are having such tough times. Yesterday, I was asked a question by somebody in London saying to me, they're really battling with homeschooling and the children at home. Can I give them some advice? Now, David, I'm not a parent. I'm not a life coach. I'm not a relationship coach. I'm not a therapist. And all I could say to them is that what I really believe is the hardest thing that I had to get through was climbing that mountain. And the way I got through it was step by step. And I said, take it day by day. You know, they're small, but when you get to the end of today, it's a great victory. And tomorrow's another day. It will end. And there is a turning point around the corner. That's why I say, you know, the lockdown was like an endurance event. This hell will end. It really, really will. And we'll all be stronger through it. It's not our choice, but we will get through. Definitely, definitely.
So of the books you've read and the things that you've seen, who has been an inspiration for you that has kind of turned your mindset into, I can achieve things?
I love motivational books. I love biographies. At the moment, I'm reading The Gift of Imperfection by Dr. Brene. She's just so amazing. She's talking about the connectedness, the courage, compassion. She's 55 years old, and she's given so much to so many people in the world. I love Arianna Huffington. She had an incredible quote, which I took on Sunday and brought into a talk yesterday, about when you control and when you can control your mind, you can control your own world and the world around you. You know, just really plugging into the way you act, the way you think, the way you communicate, not just communicate with the world, but whether you communicate with yourself. And that is so important, especially now.
It's fantastic. And I'm going to open up just now for questions. But before that, if you could share with somebody, let's say somebody sitting in front of you who says, I'm fearful of life. I'm fearful of this. We're in COVID. I'm scared of catching COVID. I'm even scared of going outside. I'm scared of doing anything new, and even scared of doing what used to be the norm. What would you say to them? What are the 3 or 5 things that they should do to move out of that space of the I can't, the no, to the what happens when you say yes?
I think the most important thing is, David, I would immediately say to them, it's okay right now in your life to feel not okay. 100%, because we could never ever have trained for what we're going through now. You know, in terms of us all being a novice in terms of COVID, 100%. I would tell them also to protect your mind, protect your heart. And what I mean by that, when you protect your mind, you do protect your heart. Being in a state of anxiety is just be conscious of what you're listening to, the conversations you're engaging with any television from sky to sea. It's just numbers, it's a number of days. And of course, that is the reality. But if you're feeling anxious, choose not to listen to that. Listen to some great music. Listen, read uplifting things. You know, think about when you felt really strong in your life, when you felt a better version of you, when you didn't feel anxious. What was happening in your life? Plug into that, because that's all you. That is completely all you. It's your experience. And I believe that where you've been in your life takes you to where you are. That's the grit. But I would really, really encourage them to be gentle with themselves, because there's nothing worse in terms of the comparison. The world seems to be okay. Everything is getting better except me. I'm feeling anxious. I don't want to go out. It is 100% okay not to feel okay. It really, really is. And to be kind, compassionate to yourself.
Right. And do you use a to-do list? Do you have a to-do list of what you want to achieve during the day? Or is it in your mind of what you're going to be doing?
At the moment, I am so committed, David, to getting my business back on track. In March last year, in 48 hours, I had 22.7 million rands worth of cancelled. Boom. That was my company. After 20 years, it was fine until those 48 hours in March. I think it was the 28th of March. My company was no longer there. for 6 months after that, the phone wasn't ringing. It was a very hard time letting go of my whole team, and just a very tough space to be in. And in terms of my day-to-day now, I made a decision at the end of September. I needed to change my mindset because I was in a sad, bad place, and I speak very openly because I need to be completely real and authentic in this talk. You know, in terms of credentials and the wonderful intro, is I'm absolutely not Wonder Woman. I'm very ordinary, and I made some great choices, which has taken me to a place where I can share my experiences. But very, very ordinary, making decisions, the right ones, the wrong ones, and just trying to get through every single day. And especially now, I've got to get my business back on track. Last year, it was the 20th of September, and I was in the car with Lisa, my partner, and I was feeling really low about my company. I was feeling insecure, the uncertainty around the event space. Been doing massive events internationally in South Africa for global brands like Mercedes-Benz, and everything was just not happening, not at all. Financial carnage around every single corner. And I said, you know what, Lisa, can you believe it's the 20th of September? 20 years ago today, I was stabbed in New York City. And I remember how low I felt at that point. In New York, there's a knife in my back. And I just made a decision there to plug into what I always thought, what's your purpose, Lee? You've been running this company for 20 years. What was the purpose of the last 20 years that determined your success? And I looked at my mission statement. It was about creative vision. It was about passion. It was about excellence. And I really, really took my tools and applied them again into my life. And slowly, David, things started turning, and slowly. Yes, there's a lot of choppy water ahead in the event space because we can't do what we need to do, but it doesn't take away the fact of 21 years of credentials. We're going to get back there. So in terms of, to answer your question about what's the day-to-day, what's happening, it's getting my company back on track in a very uncertain environment, but I'm committed, and I feel 100% we're going to turn the corner.
Excellent. So thank you for that. And I'm going to open it up for questions. So anyone can unmute and ask a question. I see that Shimron Shapiro's got a question. Shimron, do you want to ask the question, or should I read it out?
Okay, well, you can. Okay, thank you again for your talk, Lee. That was really, really enjoyable and inspirational. I asked a question. You seem to have a tremendous amount of energy. How do you energize yourself at the beginning of each day, and how do you maintain that day in, day out?
To get results, Shimron, and it's such a great question. It's something that I'm not conscious of. It's just the way I am in the world. I do believe if you want to get results, you've got to do everything it takes to get those results. And your energy is your altitude is your attitude. And you've got to walk it and talk it and walk it and talk it. And I think it comes naturally when you practice something and you've got a spring in your step. And I'm not saying you've got to take a happy pill every morning, and that would be unrealistic, that you are top of the morning every morning, but make a decision about where your day is going to go. You know, make a decision about what you can control and what you can't control. Something that I really believe, and I love to talk about control and mindset. We cannot, what I couldn't do on Everest, I couldn't control my biggest challenge, which was the cold. I just couldn't. The number one night set of base camp was minus 21 degrees. That was my reality check. And the higher you go on that mountain, the colder it gets. It got up to minus 34 degrees. And I remember I developed a mantra every morning by saying to myself, Lee, manage the cold. Don't let the cold manage you. Manage this cold. Don't let it manage you. There was no ways I could manage the temperature of minus 21 or even colder, but I could really manage how I was feeling about myself, my attitude. The temperature couldn't touch that. And that gave me strength to get through it. Exactly like that. There's so much beyond our control, but I can control the way I step into the day, my energy, my attitude, my altitude, and I'm very, very conscious of that. And the more you practice it, the more it becomes part of who you are.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Shimron. Anyone else, if you've got a question, you can unmute or put up your hand. While we're waiting for the next question, I just want to ask you, in terms of regrets, do you look back and regret anything? Or do you see it as a stepping stone to achieving other things?
Regret is, I think it's very, I don't think there's many people in life that can say, I live my life without regrets. I mean, there's things that I would have done differently. I wouldn't have been as impulsive, but I wouldn't change anything, Dave, because I believe in the regret or it's just wisdom comes to the fore. Would I do that the same? Would I do it differently? Would I think a little bit harder about what I did, the way that I did it, the way I moved forward, the decisions I made? So no regrets. definitely. I think regrets is, you can't undo something, most definitely not. You can't beat yourself up for making the wrong decision, because at that time, it was, for me at 30 years old, the world could not stand in my way. I was determined to go to New York City to work for Nike. And no matter how rough it got, and even the stabbing, I didn't get back on a plane. My ego was too big. And after every door that was closing in my face in New York City, it was like Stephen Covey's book where he talks about the 7 habits of highly successful people. And it says, you get to the top of the ladder and you realize when you're at the top of the ladder, your ladder is against the wrong building. And that's what it was. I needed to have enough humility to say, this is not where I'm meant to be. Get on that plane on the 11th of January, and on the 31st of Jan that year, of being 31 years old, starting my business. That was 21 years later. But sometimes you've got to do the detour to get back on track. It can't be a regret. It's just simply, it's part of the journey. It's part of the learning and part of the personal growth.
Right. So do you follow Stephen Covey with the 7 habits? Because that's
No, I haven't even read the book. I just know there was one story somebody told me. I thought that was exactly what New York was for me. Ladder at the top, wrong building. But no, I don't. I know he's highly sought after and highly recommended, but no, I don't. I just love that one story because I could just so relate to my New York experience with the ladder at the top of the wrong building.
I'm glad it didn't happen on the mountain, that you got to the top and realized it was the mountain. Yeah. So I just
ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's Limo here. Hi, Lee.
Hi, Limo.
I just want to ask you, in terms of prioritizing things in your life, like I'm finding it very difficult. I'm 48. I'm finding it very difficult. I've got kids. I'm exercising. I've got 2 businesses. And I just find, like, how do you actually prioritize? I'm sure you've got a lot of people contacting you, asking you for help. You also want to, like, be of service, to the community in a certain way. Like, how do you actually prioritize what you do? Like, what's important for you? Like, how do you? Yeah.
What's really important is to do the stuff. I know when, let's say as I said to you, things are so different at the moment because of what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. And that is when I look to planning my day, I know what is going to make the best version of me. And what I mean by that is to exercise is an integral part of my day. It always has been, whether I start the day with it or whether I end the day with it. And that's not about listening to an iPod. It's actually because I call it my meditation through my movement. I know after I've done that, I'm a better person. I'm more focused. I'm just in a gentler space. So when looking at one's crazy day and busy day and all the commitments, of course, nothing takes that away. Absolutely nothing. What needs to be done, from parenting to roles, responsibilities, as well as a lot of pressure with 2 businesses. But if you look at your day and say, well, if I take that 45 minutes out or that hour or whatever it is, it's going to make me a better person to achieve all the things in terms of business, parent, whatever it is. It almost becomes an imperative thing that it's got to be a slot in your diary, and it's got to be unwavering. You need to honor that, because essentially the impact on you being a better you, to give more and be more fulfilled, it's a no-brainer. If that answers your question.
Yeah. And do you plan your day? Do you actually write down, okay, every hour my day is planned, or do you just take your day how it comes?
No, my days are very similar in terms of, it's engaging with service providers, engaging with clients. Also, the fact that it's a virtual world at the moment, we're not living in our cars, so there's way more time at home. But the one thing that's unbelievably important to me, and that's exercise. So somewhere in that day, I'm going to fit it in, somewhere, because at the end of the day, it just makes it a better day for me in terms of having done that and making that a priority. There will always be a reason not to do something. There will always be something coming in its way. You've got to say no to that, to create the boundary, saying this is important for me, to honor that.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thank you for that.
Right. I find it interesting that you, Lee, and she thinks she's more than you. Her name's Lee Moore. So
yeah, I actually go by Lee as well.
Okay. Lee, the suggestion is spend less time on Facebook for you. Actually, I enjoy the jokes you put up. So.
Yeah, I am on Facebook. I find it a good networking platform as well. But yeah.
Excellent. So just in terms, I think, just to wrap up and look at all the things, one of the things for me that stood up, there's so much that you've you've shared with us. But one of the comments that you made was about, it's not the time, it's the correct time. So when it's not just doing it, it's doing, just can you unpack that a little bit more so that I understand what do you mean by correct time?
Time is so limited for so many people. It's a busy life. Yes, there are a lot of regulations, but before you know it, your day is completely full. How many times I can't believe it's 11 o'clock already. I can't believe it. Where's the day gone? Everybody said that, or you've heard that. You've got to make the time count. And what I mean by that is if you've allocated that hour, that 45 minutes, whatever it is to do that one thing that is so important to you, ensure that it really is quality. You know, Oprah Winfrey has got such an incredible line, and I wish it was mine. She said, be excellent. Be excellent in every single thing that you do, because when you are excellent, you are unforgettable. And, you know, there's nothing worse than getting to the end of the day or end of the morning, saying, I really wasted that, or where's this time gone? Make it count. Be conscious of it, because you can never, ever rewind. You can never buy back time. Most definitely not. So whatever that session is, quality, let it really be quality, and let it be fulfilled, and start with the end in mind. This is the hour that I've allocated to X, and make sure that it really counts. Switch your phone off, leave your phone in a different room, but make it count that you can't buy that back. You can't undo it. You can't turn the clock back, but that it was great, and you get out of that what you aim to get. You'll feel amazing about yourself.
So start with the end in mind is also from Stephen Covey, by the way. So that's 2 out of
thanks, David.
2 out of the 7 habits you've got to read.
I've got to read it. Okay.
So, yeah. So just, if you look back at your life, let's say you are 99 years old, you're about to have your 100th birthday on the 1st of April, and somebody's about to make a speech of your life. What would give you the greatest sense of achievement, of self-worth, if they said, what about you? What would they need to say to give you that sense of self-worth or that you've achieved?
It's such a great, powerful question. And, you know, I think, David, is that I encourage every single person on this webinar this morning to really think about that question for their own lives, because that talk about starting with the end in mind, you know, reaching that age. I am so aware of my purpose in my life right now, and that is to inspire, and it's to lead. And if I get to the age of 100 and I've known that I've inspired, because if you've inspired, and I often say to Lisa, my partner, is that if I could make the difference that somebody they listen to a talk, they were inspired by some tool, some message, some lesson, some story, to live the life that they've imagined for themselves, to achieve the yeses in their life, to say, you know, I thought that I couldn't do that and I did it. That would be my greatest achievement, my accomplishment. It really, really would, you know, from reading the book or hearing a talk. And yeah, if I can reach the end of my life and know that I've done that, then I will leave this earth smiling all the way.
Fantastic. So what I'm hearing in the message that for me has come through is it's not just about you. It's doing something for you that is service to others.
Yeah.
Making the time count. It's being excellent at what you're doing. And in order to be excellent, you have to focus on whatever you're doing at the time. I think your story of trying to run the business and climb a mountain at the same time, and then just turning one of them off and deciding what is your main goal, is very, very powerful.
Yeah.
So I just thank you so much for sharing your time with us and for motivating us. And this is something that hopefully, I don't want to limit you to 100. So when you turn 101, they will say that you inspired all these people in the talk.
Thanks, David.
So I just want to hand back to Tracy and Lee. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. You're so wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
David, thank you so much.